Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of like absolute precision.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it feels like engineering almost. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, the doctor points to the screen, and you know exactly what's wrong and how to fix it.
Right. We crave that binary categorization, broken or not broken, infected or clear,
Exactly.
because it's visible. And frankly, that visibility provides a lot of psychological comfort to a patient.
But then, you step into the world of mood, neurobiology, and how our external environment actually rewires our brain. And suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
It really is.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just incredibly murky. And we start throwing around these casual phrases to describe what might actually be profound biological shifts.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. The complexity just skyrockets when the trigger for a condition isn't a physical trauma or, I don't know, a virus you picked up on an airplane.
Right.
It's literally just the shifting of the planet on its axis and the changing of the seasons.
Which brings us to this really fascinating source document we're doing a deep dive into today. It's called The Georgia Clinician's Guide to Seasonal Affective Disorder, published by Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
It's a great resource.
It really is. And our mission here is to completely dismantle what you, the listener, probably think you know about the so-called winter blues.
Yes.
We are going to explore the hidden neurobiology of seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. We'll look at why your zip code might not offer the protection you think it does.
That's a big one.
Huge. And we're going to break down the highly specific, incredibly effective clinical toolkit used to treat it. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really understand what we're looking at, we have to start by abandoning the cultural baggage of that phrase, winter blues.
Because it sounds so casual, right?
Exactly. But the clinical reality outlined in this guide describes a diagnosable biological condition, and it's affecting roughly 5% of U.S. adults.
Wow, 5%. That's actually a lot of people.
It's a massive demographic. You've got
Yeah.
millions of people navigating a severe medical issue that society routinely just, brushes off as a temporary slump, or just someone being annoyed that they have to wear a heavy coat.
That language issue is huge.
Yeah.
Winter blues sound so, I don't know, harmless.
Right, like you just need a vacation.
Yeah. It sounds like something a warm cup of hot cocoa and a good movie can fix.
Yeah.
But the clinical guide makes a very sharp distinction here.
It does.
SAD is not just its own little standalone quirk or a bad mood. It is strictly categorized in the DSM-5 as a subtype of major depressive disorder.
Yeah, it is major depressive disorder with a seasonal pattern specifier. That's the clinical term. And the diagnostic criteria are remarkably rigid.
How so?
Well, the clinical guide highlights the 2+ consecutive years rule. A clinician cannot diagnose you just because you had one rough, stressful January.
Right, because January is stressful for everyone.
Exactly. You must exhibit major depressive episodes that begin and end in the exact same seasons for at least 2 consecutive years.
And it's not even the standard presentation of depression we usually hear about, right? The source highlights what they call atypical depressive features.
Yes, the atypical features are really what set it apart functionally.
When you read the clinical presentation, it paints a bizarre picture of what the human body is doing. You see hypersomnia, hyperphagia.
Which is that intense craving for carbs.
Right, this almost primal craving for carbohydrates and the
Yeah.
resulting weight gain. And then my absolute favorite medical term from the guide, leaden paralysis.
Leaden paralysis is such a visceral symptom.
It sounds terrifying, honestly.
Patients report the physical sensation that their arms and legs are impossibly heavy. It's as if their limbs are actually made of lead.
Wow.
It goes far, far beyond standard fatigue.
It sounds to me like the human body is trying its hardest to go into bear mode. It's literally attempting to hibernate.
That's a great way to think about it.
Your biology is screaming at you to eat heavy carbs, sleep for 14 hours, and not move a single muscle. But society still expects you to put on a suit, commute in the dark, and show up for a 9 a.m. strategy meeting.
And that friction is where the damage happens. The real-world fallout documented in the guide is severe. We're talking profound social withdrawal, tanked work performance, and heavily strained parenting and relationships.
It's just devastating.
But what's fascinating here is the timeline. The timeline is the ultimate differentiator.
Okay, tell me more about that.
With chronic major depressive disorder, the symptoms persist entirely independently of the calendar. A patient struggles in December, and they struggle in July.
Right.
But with SAD, the hallmark is full remission in the spring and summer. The seasons change, the daylight returns, and the depression lifts completely.
Like a switch being flipped.
Precisely. That cyclical on and off nature points directly to a biological catalyst rather than purely psychological stressors.
Okay, let's talk about that catalyst, though. Because as I was reading this source, my geography completely threw me. This is the Georgia Clinician's Guide.
Right.
Georgia, the Peach State. When I think of seasonal affective disorder, I assume it is exclusively a Pacific Northwest problem,
A lot of people assume that.
or something you only deal with if you live in Seattle or maybe Alaska, where you're dealing with freezing temperatures and blizzards all the time.
Sure.
So if I move to Georgia, it's warmer, I'm outside more. Should that cure it? Like, why does the guide specifically highlight Georgia transplants still struggling? Does the temperature not matter at all?
That is probably the most common misconception surrounding this disorder. We inherently link SA to freezing temperatures, snow drifts, being stuck indoors.
Yeah, that's exactly what I pictured.
But the neurobiology doesn't care if you're wearing a heavy parka in Minnesota or a light sweater in Atlanta. It only cares about photons. Yes, it cares about light hitting the back of your eye. The reality of Georgia's climate is that, yes, the winters are very mild. But because of its latitude, the daylight still drops by a massive 4+ hours between the peak of summer and the depths of winter.
4 hours of daylight, just gone.
Just gone.
That is a massive chunk of your waking life suddenly plunged into darkness. I mean, you're waking up and getting ready for work in the dark.
Yep.
And you're driving home in the pitch black.
And the human brain is extraordinarily sensitive to that loss. Even mild reductions in sunlight can trigger these episodes in susceptible individuals.
So it's literally just the light.
It is the biological absence of light, not the temperature of the air, that acts as the trigger. You see these transplants move to Georgia from cloudier, colder regions, expecting a geographical cure for their depression.
And it doesn't work.
It doesn't work because their biology is so sensitive to light deprivation that simply losing those 4 hours in a mild Georgia winter is enough to plunge them right back into a depressive episode.
Wow. So the temperature is really just a red herring. It is entirely about the light.
Entirely.
But if our retina's lack of light reception is what's misfiring here, then standard talk therapy or a warm climate alone can't be the silver bullet. How does losing 4 hours of light actually cause so much chaos inside the brain?
Well, to understand the chaos, we have to trace the anatomical pathway. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, lay it on me.
When sunlight enters your eye, it hits the retina and sends a direct electrical signal down the optic nerve to a tiny region of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Bronchiasmatic nucleus. That's a mouthful.
It is, but just think of this as the brain's master clock. And that clock regulates our circadian rhythms by communicating directly with the pineal gland.
Okay, so the eye is literally hardwired to the brain's clock.
It is a direct circuit. The pineal gland is responsible for producing melatonin, which is, the hormone that makes you sleep.
Right, the stuff people take for jet lag.
Exactly. When that electrical signal from bright sunlight hits the master clock, it actively suppresses the pineal gland. It tells the brain, halt the melatonin, it is daytime.
Got it.
But when the light drops off significantly in the winter, that suppression lifts. The brain is just flooded with melatonin all day long.
Oh, wow.
Which leaves the patient feeling sluggish, exhausted, and trapped in that leaden paralysis we talked about.
And that completely explains the hibernation symptoms. Your brain literally thinks it's time to sleep all day.
Exactly.
But wait, I want to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Yeah.
If it's just about missing the sun, why can't I just swallow a vitamin D supplement with my breakfast and call it a day? Does the light itself do something a vitamin can't?
That's a great question. A vitamin D supplement definitely supports overall health, but it does not send that electrical signal through the optic nerve to suppress melatonin.
Ah, so it misses the clock entirely.
Right. Furthermore, light regulates serotonin. Serotonin is a vital neurotransmitter that stabilizes mood, energy, and appetite. When sunlight hits the retina, it stimulates serotonin production. So less sunlight in the winter means a massive drop in serotonin.
Which perfectly explains the hyperphagia, the intense craving for carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Eating a massive plate of pasta gives you a quick spike in serotonin, right?
Yes, it does.
So your body isn't just hungry, it is literally trying to self-medicate a neurochemical deficit by forcing you to eat carbs.
That's exactly what's happening. And this biological reality completely shatters the myths surrounding the condition.
Like what kind of myths?
Well, the first myth being that SAD isn't real and you're simply feeling down about the end of the holidays or, the gloomy weather.
Right.
The strict neurobiological correlates the serotonin depletion, the melatonin overproduction, the circadian disruption. All of that proves this is a physical condition manifesting as a psychiatric one.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly incredibly frustrating for patients. Because of those myths, the most common advice given to people with SAD is to just push through it.
Oh, absolutely.
Just go to the gym, force yourself to go to that party, just try harder. But the clinical guide points out that behavioral activation is nearly impossible, precisely because the disorder drains the very neurochemicals required for motivation.
Trying to out-willpower a neurochemical imbalance is a losing battle.
It has to be exhausting.
It is. And untreated SAD doesn't just resolve itself smoothly. It repeats annually, and the neural pathways associated with that depression can actually deepen, causing the episodes to worsen over time.
You know, I used to think of it like telling a car with an empty gas tank to just drive faster.
It's a common analogy.
But based on what you're saying about the electrical signals from the eye, it's not even an empty gas tank. It's more like someone snipped the wires between the ignition and the engine.
Yeah.
The fuel is in the tank. The driver's intent to drive is there. But the biological spark plug, the serotonin, is physically disconnected. You cannot just try harder to start the car.
That is the exact mechanism at play. The intent is there, but the biological pathway is disabled, which means we have to pivot to the clinical evidence-based toolkit that actually reestablishes that connection.
Okay, so let's get into the toolkit. What actually works?
Well, the first-line defense detailed in the guide is bright light therapy.
Now, I assume we aren't just talking about turning on all the lamps in your living room and opening the blinds, right?
Not at all. Standard indoor lighting is entirely insufficient. The protocol specifically requires a 10,000 lux light box.
10,000 lux. What does that even mean in practical terms?
To understand lux, it's a unit measuring the actual amount of light hitting a surface, in this case, your retina. A brightly lit corporate office is maybe 500 lux.
Oh, wow. So 500 compared to 10,000.
Exactly. It doesn't even come close to triggering the biological response we need. 10,000 lux mimics the intensity and the signal of outdoor morning sunlight.
Okay, so how do you use it?
The treatment requires sitting near the specific light box for 20 to 30 minutes daily throughout the fall and winter.
And the timing of this is critical, right? The guide emphasizes doing this within the first hour of waking up.
The timing is everything. By flooding the retina with 10,000 lux immediately upon waking, you are artificially jump-starting that circadian rhythm.
You're hacking the master clock.
Exactly. You are forcing it to send that electrical signal to the pineal gland screaming, stop making melatonin, start making serotonin. It tricks the neurobiology into believing it's a bright summer morning.
But the guide doesn't stop at the light box. Light therapy is just one pillar. It also heavily emphasizes CBT-SAD, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically tailored for a seasonal affective disorder.
Yes.
How did that actually differ from standard talk therapy?
CBT-SAD actively targets the we all have. But the therapy doesn't just talk about the feeling, it actively restructures that thought. It plots out structured, highly specific pleasure engagement strategies to force behavioral activation.
Oh, to prevent the massive social withdrawal that deepens the depressive cycle.
Right. So you have the light box treating the physical deficit and the CBT-SAD rewiring the behavioral response.
Got it. But the guide also dives into medical interventions. It mentions bupropion. Now, I often hear people lump all antidepressants into the SSRI category, but bupropion isn't an SSRI, is it?
No, it is not. Bupropion is an NDRI, a norepinephrine dopamine reuptake inhibitor.
Okay, so what does that mean for the patient?
Well, while SSRIs target serotonin, bupropion targets the reuptake of dopamine and norepinephrine, which are neurotransmitters heavily involved in energy, focus, and motivation.
Which are exactly what you lose with SAD.
Precisely. In fact, the extended-release version of bupropion is actually FDA approved specifically for the prevention of seasonal affective disorder. Clinicians often use it to prevent the seasonal drop in energy before the episode fully takes hold.
And the guide brings up vitamin D again, but places it strictly in a supportive role, right?
Yes. Because we get vitamin D synthesized through our skin from the sun, and we're hiding inside from the dark winter, we become deficient.
Makes sense. So supplementing it under medical guidance supports overall immune and metabolic health, even if it isn't the primary cure for the circadian disruption.
Exactly. And then you add in basic lifestyle factors. Seeking out whatever natural morning sunlight exists, keeping your sleep schedule incredibly rigid, and forcing social connection.
So it's really a multi-pronged approach.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see a comprehensive safety net. The 10,000 lux light box hacks the biological clock. The CBT SAD dismantles the cognitive traps. And the targeted medication, like an NDRI, chemically supports the baseline neurochemistry.
It attacks the disorder from every conceivable angle.
Every single angle.
It is an incredible safety net.
Yeah.
But, reading this, a huge flashing red light went off in my head. We have this world-class evidence-based toolkit. But it is entirely useless if you, the listener, cannot actually access it.
That is the unfortunate reality of healthcare.
Think about what we just discussed. This disorder gives you leaden paralysis. It destroys your motivation. It isolates you. How on earth is someone buried under that profound level of biological exhaustion supposed to navigate the friction of healthcare?
It's incredibly difficult.
How do they find a specialist, drive across town in the dark, sit in a waiting room, and afford the massive out-of-pocket costs?
That friction is the ultimate hurdle in psychiatric care, and you cannot rely on like a BuzzFeed quiz to self-diagnose something this complex.
Definitely not.
You need a licensed clinician to evaluate the strict DSM-5 criteria.
Yep.
But expecting a patient paralyzed by seasonal depression to overcome traditional healthcare barriers is just unrealistic.
Which is exactly why the Source's creator, Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC, serves as such a critical case study in this deep dive. They aren't just publishing guides. They are a prime example of what structural accessibility actually looks like for a condition that actively tries to keep you isolated.
Their model is a game changer.
CHC operates their clinical practice 100% via telehealth.
The impact of a fully telehealth model cannot be overstated here. By serving all 159 counties in Georgia virtually, they completely eliminate the geographical friction.
Right, a patient doesn't have to leave their house. They don't have to fight rush hour traffic in the dock.
They can access a culturally competent team of licensed therapists, LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs, directly from their living room.
But the real barrier that keeps people suffering silently is almost always the money. Therapy is notoriously expensive.
It really is.
What makes CHC's model groundbreaking is how they've actively removed that financial friction. For Medicaid patients, they've negotiated a $0 copay. Zero.
That's practically unheard of.
And for those utilizing major commercial plans, the out-of-pocket costs are incredibly low. We're talking $10 to $40 a session. They have systematically dismantled the exact barriers that usually keep a paralyzed, depressed person from getting help.
This raises an important question, really. The broader implication of a model like this is profound.
How so?
Well, when you look at the sheer accessibility of $0 copays and statewide reach, you have to wonder how many people are enduring the crushing weight of leaden paralysis every single winter simply because they incorrectly assume clinical care is financially or geographically impossible for them.
They just think it's out of reach.
Exactly. They believe they just have to suffer through it, unaware that evidence-based relief has been adapted to reach them exactly where they are.
It breaks your heart to think about people suffering needlessly, but it also gives you an immense amount of hope.
Yes, it does.
Which brings us to the core message we want you to take away from this source today. If you, listening to this right now, have noticed a winter version of yourself showing up year after year,
if you find yourself suddenly craving heavy carbs, sleeping constantly, withdrawing from the people you love,
and feeling physically heavy as soon as the days get shorter, hear this loud and clear. It is a treatable biological condition.
it is not a character flaw. It is not a lack of willpower.
It is your neurobiology reacting to a loss of light. The clinician's guide leaves us with a very simple call to action. Don't wait until next winter to plan ahead. You can get assessed now. You can acquire your 10,000 lux light box. You can build your safety net before the seasons change.
It is entirely about taking back control from the calendar. But, stepping back from the clinical toolkit for a second, the neurobiology of SID leaves us with a fascinating, almost unsettling reality to consider.
What's that?
If our human brains are so exquisitely sensitive that a mere 4-hour shift in invisible daily sunlight can completely alter our personality, drain our energy levels, and dictate our physical cravings,
Right.
what other subtle, overlooked rhythms in our environment are quietly pulling the strings of our minds without us ever even realizing it?
Wow. Think about that the next time you try to find a simple psychological cause for how you feel. We started this deep dive talking about x-rays and broken bones, things you can easily see and point to. But it turns out the most profound impacts on our well-being might just be the changing invisible light coming through the window. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay in the light, and we'll see you next time.